And we are live. Welcome to a special edition of STS as we recap what happened today in Charlie Adelson's case hearing, as well as what in the world is going on with Katie Magbanua's proffer. And we have three tremendous guests, most of whom you are going to recognize right away. We've got Dr. Melissa Hamilton, J.D., Ph.D. Those are a lot of initials. She is a professor of law and criminal justice at the University of Surrey School of Law. That is in the United Kingdom. She holds both a J.D. and Ph.D. In the middle is a famed Tallahassee defense attorney, R. Timothy Jansen, who's handled complex civil, administrative, and criminal litigation. First as Chief Trial Counsel for the Secretary of State of Florida. He does it all. And then the man below him is a famous YouTube personality, mentor, lawyer who hosts deep dive true crime as well as other channels on YouTube and is also an attorney. So welcome to one and all. On to today's news very quickly. So we all know that Charlie Adelson was in court today. Looked a little more heavy set, a little scruffy, and we found out, I believe, in under 7 minutes time, Circuit Judge Robert Wheeler says opening arguments are set to begin April 28th. Jury selection set to start April 24th. Evidence will begin on May 1st, and there was a little whispering and a sidebar, which we're going to get to in a moment. But leading off with you, Tim Jansen, anything about today's hearing that stood out to you in your mind?
Not really. The 2 to 3 weeks for a trial is kind of interesting. Murder trials up here don't usually last that long. So a 2 to 3 week trial in state court is unusual, which means they're going to play the tapes, obviously, and call witnesses. So maybe we're going to hear from 3 of the prior co-defendants or co-conspirators at the trial.
Mentor, do you agree with that assessment? Is this an unusual period of time, a normal amount of time, or did that stand out to you as well?
Well, I'm never going to disagree with Tim, but I'm going to say in general, this particular case is very complex. It has a lot of pieces, and it's a big conspiracy. So the prior trials were kind of long as well, and there may be additional witnesses now that there's a proffer from one of the, from Katie Magbanua, who was convicted and now is apparently cooperating with the state. So I'm assuming that the reason why they're asking for that much time is because of the prior 2 cases and the potential additional witnesses.
And Dr. Hamilton, what was your, I know it was short and it was sweet, but what was your take overall on the hearing today?
Oh, I thought it was very interesting on a number of aspects. One is, so Tim's comment that this is a long period of time for a trial that's inconsistent with practices in Florida, despite being a murder trial, it's just to me another indication that when you have a high profile case, then the wheels of justice go even slower, that there's often then more attention paid to high profile cases and individuals who are of upper income levels or upper class. So that's kind of still an unfortunate thing in our criminal justice system, that your status does matter. Other thing I thought was interesting was the defense counsel was relatively nice. He was thanking the judge and thanking the prison, indicating that he was, or at least the implication to me was that he was getting more access to his client and that prison conditions were better for Charlie. So that's also of interest. And again, it's indicating the high profile nature of things that prison systems would respond to that, because I can imagine a lot of defendants in Florida prisons waiting for trial are not getting those kinds of accommodations. And the other thing I thought was interesting was just to watch Charlie. So sometimes he was smiling with his attorney, laughing, but at other times it looked like he knew this was another shoe to drop, that even though this had been very serious for him, when the judge is setting a trial date, that really ratchets up, this is a serious thing, my life is going down. And so for a long time, he he appeared worried until he then recognized and remembered the camera was there, and then he tried to have a different face. But that was a face of a man knowing that things have turned.
And we did, in fact, see there was a lot of talk about Daniel Rashbaum and was he faking people out, trying to stall for time. But we saw those crutches patented back in 1917. I looked it up. So he actually looks like he did break his ankle. And I'm glad I have you guys because, I'm just a news guy. I bring in the experts. I remember very vividly watching the O.J. Simpson trial, and I forget exactly how long that went on, but it seemed to me, Tim, if I'm correct, it went on for months. So relatively, I didn't think this was a long period of time, but I guess I'm wrong, right, Tim?
Well, California is completely different than any other trial system in the United States. It did take a long time. And I remember I was just out of being an assistant U.S. attorney. I was doing commentary here on the O.J. trial when that happened. It can be longer, and I agree with Melissa. It's a high complex case. They've got a very good attorney on the other side. They're going to have resources to go into everything. They probably got motions. They probably got motion in limines. They're probably not going to be able to get all their evidence in as quickly as they think. They're going to have to link it up before it's introduced. So it can be painstaking and time-taking. Jury selection, I don't know if it's going to be that difficult because Charlie's not from here. But there's no one in Tallahassee that does not know about this case or the prior trials. So getting someone who hasn't made a decision is going to be difficult if they're honest in jury selection.
Interesting. Now, one of the other issues that came up, not an issue, but something that we did see was a call for a sidebar from Daniel Rashbaum and Dr. Hamilton. We got to see that courtesy of Mentor Lawyers feed, actually. But Dr. Hamilton, you thought that you picked up on something a little bit. Can you expound for our audience?
Yeah, so the sidebar initially, it was silent as it should be. But then as I was allowing it to play on, because I kind of was watching Charlie's reaction, you could hear some tidbits of them discussing a proffer. But unfortunately, I couldn't go back through it because I had to run onto this podcast. But it'll be interesting to go back through it again to piece through what else one can hear about it.
And to you, Mentor Lawyer, about this proffer. So we know that last month, Katie Magbanua was brought into Tallahassee. As far as we know, she is still here, but we have not heard a word, neither from the state, from the defense, from the media even. How do you read this, if you read it at all?
Well, it seemed to me that some people were able to hear. I was there in the courtroom and I heard a few words. But the gist of it, it seems to me that that the defense was a bit worried about this proffer in the sense of they don't want it to go out in public. So maybe that's what they were discussing, that maybe the defense wants to keep the proffer sealed. And I think I maybe heard something about additional proffers, but it was, very difficult to hear. And I do not know why they went on a sidebar. This is a public hearing. And it is a bit strange to have a sidebar in a public hearing when you don't have a jury that you have to keep stuff away from. So that was a bit strange. But I think it was about the proffer, for sure.
Tim, you only have 30 years experience, just 30. So what do you make of this proffer? Is it on the table, you think, not on the table? And was it unusual to have that sidebar?
It's not unusual. There is no jury there. But if they're going to do motion in limines or they're going to try to keep evidence out, you don't want it coming in a public hearing that could potentially taint a juror or be in the newspaper. Media was there, even though the jurors aren't there. Whenever you're in a courtroom, you tell people all the time, you're in more than one courtroom. You're in the appellate court and you're in the court of public opinion on high profile cases. So my sources tell me that the first proffer, she didn't give much. Now, that was a source that wanted to be very careful, but said they didn't get much from the first proffer. But I don't know true that is, but
So I spoke to John Singer today, who's a well-respected attorney who's on the show a lot out of New York City, and he emailed me, said after 2 trials and gazillions of taxpayer money, the state is listening, but they and Judge Wheeler are not going to cut Katie any deal. Dr. Hamilton, you've been on with John. Is he have a point here?
I somewhat hope he's right. And the reason I just say somewhat is it's a kind of a double-edged sword here in terms of if Katie, is willing to come forth with information that, what everybody's calling the truth. So on the one hand, we want to hold everyone who is responsible criminally culpable. So her ability to bring additional facts that is able to adjudicate additional people who are guilty so that they can face sentence is a good thing. The counter to that, though, is the fact that if she does do that, then that would most likely to be counter to the evidence she gave in court 2 times. And so what we don't want to do is incentivize defendants who are factually guilty to go to trial, roll the dice, and then if they're convicted and given a really lengthy sentence like Katie, is then have a second bite at the apple to be able to say, okay, now I'll come forward and I'll get some reward. If we incentivize that, that's the negative, is that then many more people will go to trial thinking that they have a second chance. The other thing is if they do put her on and she contradicts her previous testimony, that most likely means that she perjured herself. And we also don't want to put somebody on the stand again who previously committed perjury. So those are kind of the both sides of it, as I see, and there's a tension between them. And
there's definitely cynicism about whether Katie Magbanua would ever tell the truth. Tim, to you, you're in Yiddish, Big Macher is a big deal. You're the Big Macher in Tallahassee as his mentor, but you've represented a number of high-profile people, Jameis Winston, one of them, J.T. Burnett. So just talk, and we did on our show briefly last time, about the impact of this being such a high-profile case. We got the Dateline episode coming up. We all know that Over My Dead Body on Wondery had well over 10 million downloads. So how difficult or easy does it make it for the defense and the state being so high-profile?
Well, first of all, everybody's going to second guess everything you do, and you got to really pick and choose your strategy and stick to it. The key thing is going to be jury selection. When you go to pick a jury, I always want to pick a juror who doesn't want to be on the jury. And people, they won't be honest with you in jury selection. The people that want to be on that jury, they either want to write a book or want to get famous, or they have a personal vendetta where they want to sit in judgment. So I always, in high-profile cases, try to find the person that's trying to get out of it. Try to find the person that's not giving the perfect answer to be neutral. And it's not easy to do. And I've found in a couple of times, I found in a high-profile case in Panama City, a doctor I was prosecuting back then, she was a patient. And I was able to get her to say she was a patient, so I got her removed because she had an interest. And as soon as I got her removed, she took off her shirt, and it said "Free Freddie," the doctor. So I was lucky to get her off the jury. But there are people who are going to lie because they want to get on that jury, especially in high-profile cases.
Interesting. So let's start taking some comments here. We'll, roll with the flow here. This is LJ. Shout out to LJ. Shout out to the Skeeter Girl, who are always devoted viewers. Says, we know Charlie blabs about everything. So my guess in all caps is Katie knows everything. Mentor, you probably been following this case closer than anyone else. Does LJ make a valid point here, you think?
Well, Katie was involved, so she knows everything, obviously. So, what information will come out of her if she tells the truth, we do not know. And whether anybody else is involved other than Charlie, we do not know. But as Dr. Melissa said, certainly she will have more value. First of all, one point is this. I mean, there's a Florida statute that helps people who have already been convicted still get a deal out of cooperation because we want the full truth out. Obviously, whatever deal she gets, first of all, it's not going to be from the state unless they find a way to vacate that judgment. But the usual way would be to just actually submit a motion to the state for full cooperation and demonstrating that she was substantially useful to the state in bringing new charges against new defendants, for example, or to obtain a conviction against Charlie. So I really think that obviously she knows the truth. She was involved. We do not know what that truth is yet. She hasn't, the proffer hasn't come out yet. So.
Next comment, the gardener. When Charlie Adelson told Katie Magbanua he would hire a hitman to kill anyone jeopardizing his family, maybe she was so scared that she started recording their subsequent conversations for gang police use. Insurance. The good doctor, Dr. Hamilton, is this a possibility?
Sure. I've always thought she was strategic and that there was a high possibility that she'd not only be recording various conversations, but keeping a copy of the various text messages and other the WhatsApp conversations, perhaps, as collateral and leverage.
Next comment comes from the Skeeter girl. We know that Charlie's team hasn't seen the proffer yet. Do we know that, Tim, or we don't know that?
I don't think we know that yet. The trial's not until April or end of April, 1st of May. I would think, as Melissa said, a doctor, I'm sorry, she is a tainted witness. And one of the worst tainted witnesses you could have because she has the biggest outcome in the whole trial. In federal court, they have a special jury instruction saying that you should consider this witness's testimony more or less than any other witness in any trial. So if she's got a proffer, she better have some independent evidence to back it up because she's already committed perjury at least twice.
And mentor, to you, do we know this, as the Skeeter girl suggests, that the defense has not seen this proffer?
Yeah, my understanding from being there in person today was that the defense doesn't have the proffer yet.
Big shout out to Fancy Fiction, who I see has joined us. Loved, and she says she loves Tim's office. I love Tim's office too. That's pretty sweet. Next comment from the Crow Eater. Thanks for discussing this, guys. Looking forward to this whole case playing out and for justice to be served for Dan Markell. Dr. Hamilton, we talked about this with John Singer. He thinks that there's a preponderance of evidence against Charlie Adelson. Do people watching right now who want to see Charlie Adelson behind bars, is it likely he will wind up there? Is there enough evidence?
Well, he's currently behind bars, although it's a pretrial status. And preponderance is not enough. There's got to be proof beyond a reasonable doubt, which is much higher than that. So those are, very two significantly different barriers. Is there a proof beyond reasonable doubt? I think arguably there probably will be. So there is a high likelihood that he will be found guilty. Is it a guaranteed or a slam dunk? Absolutely not. But one other thing I want to just mention or hope you would do is Katie is kind of a shapeshifter. So if you look at, if you would create like a montage of the photographs of her over time, she looks like very different people. So it's like she creates this image that she wants to the people she's portraying herself to. In some cases, she's got very sexy photographs. She's beautiful, young. Other ones, she looks like the perfect mother. Sometimes she looks like the, quintessential, librarian. And so it's she's just, the image changes. And that's reason why I say that she's strategic is she's portraying in the courtroom, for example, something very differently than photos that she's sharing with her boyfriends and various other images that she has. So just a comment I wanted to make.
That's an interesting point. Very interesting comment that gets into the psychological aspect. Observation station. I need to see a pic of Chucky the Clown. I don't have one to put up, but Mentor, you've been watching him. How has he evolved physically since the last time we saw him?
He seemed to be a little bit chubbier, but mostly, I think the video on my channel is extremely clear, so you can see it for yourself. I have the whole hearing there, and there's a lot of close-ups of Charlie Adelson. So
That's a good promo. Is that on Deep Dive True Crime or one of your 50,000 other channels?
and Deep Dive True Crime, yes.
That all have way more subscribers than me. Not jealous at all. JPJ says he looks like crapola. Good. Tim, talk about what happens to criminal defendants in jail. He's only been there since April. It's not that long. He could be there the rest of his life. What do you think's going on in his head right now? And do you start to get antsy? And do you think he's starting to think, maybe I got to flip on somebody?
Well, he's not going to flip on his family. So that's probably not going to happen. The interesting thing on this case about the evidence, it's a life sentence, capital life sentence. So when he had a bond hearing, the standard to keep him in was very high. It's clear and convincing. It's even higher than beyond a reasonable doubt. And the sitting judge on that trial found beyond a reasonable doubt, found that the evidence presumption was great. So this could be a strong circumstantial evidence case. I do not think that Magbanua will ever become out as a credible witness unless she has some tape recording, text messages, or something. She's not going to convict Adelson. The evidence is going to put a piece together, and the government may not even use her. I say, look at the first DCA. Does the state file a motion with the court to release jurisdiction so that they are able to cut a deal with Katie so that she can become a state witness?
Dr. Hamilton, paper thin says, which I am not paper thin, asks, when are they going to arrest Donna? John Singer, I invoke his name a lot. I respect him a lot. I talk to him a lot, which is why he seems to think she's going down next. Some have said Harvey, but do you think there's enough right now to indict Donna for this crime?
I think there would be enough, but not enough, not strong enough for a prosecutor to be really confident of a conviction. So because there's no statute of limitations on murder, they can play for time. And probably this might be kind of a game of dominoes, which is the pressure from Katie to place, Katie's potential evidence, place pressure on Charlie maybe to give up evidence, and then get additional on Donna. So it can work that way. And I'm not sure I'm quite as convinced that Charlie won't turn on his family, because he might be convinced that his elderly parents and his, angelic looking sister will be seen as sympathetic, that the prosecutors either won't go after him as much, or juries will be merciful. We sometimes have juries not go against the evidence in terms of, finding people not guilty just because they're sympathetic, or even if they were found guilty, likely, or the bet would be potentially that they would get a much lesser charge. So I'm just not as convinced about Charlie. But also part of it too is Charlie often is about himself. So in the end, when he's feeling the pressure, he may well give up on them.
I am no lawyer. I'm just a human being and the son of a psychiatrist and the son of a social worker. And my gut tells me he could turn on somebody. We had ex-cons on this show. We had 3 ex-cons and who are men, and then 2 female ex-cons. The male ex-cons talked about prison code, talked about street code, and they all seem to feel that Charlie doesn't come from the same cloth. He's basically a pampered Jewish kid, not unlike myself a little bit, and he's going to crack under pressure. And I'll be honest, no way I'm turning on Carm. I think I could turn on my sister, but I might turn on somebody. And if I'm Charlie, I am definitely getting nervous. Fancy Fiction, arguably the biggest superstar in the Dan Markel world, spelled with an I, says, funny as hell to hear the entire sidebar, which we just talked about, but I'm always thinking in this little head of mine, and I'm wondering, Tim, is there some kind of legal repercussion with this? I'm wondering if the court, because I was listening to the court feed and I thought they muted it. It seems dicey that we, the public, should have heard anything. Are you concerned that we were able to hear that audio?
It happens. Sometimes it happens. And I've seen it happen. People hear things. I've heard where jurors have heard stuff. And it's like making an objection to something that went out. You object to it. So the judge has to tell the juror that's important not to listen to it again. I'm not sure what they can do at this point to the public. I think it's going to be, it'll move on to something more important. Katie's proffer, is she a witness? Is she getting, that's going to take over the scenario at that point.
So Fancy Fiction, I got to pay her respect, and she's got a question, so we got to ask it. Can you explain why Katie's proffer may be ongoing? Can the legal eagles flush that out? I heard every word of the sidebar with my beats on and volume up. She's the one who enhanced the Dolce Vita tapes too, Fancy Fiction. So, Dr. Hamilton, to you, can you explain why this might be still going on?
It could be a matter of Katie's just doling out things, trickling them out just to be able to stay in the local jail for a while and get attention. The other thing, it could be either alternatively or in addition, is because she has taken the stand and denied it all. If she's now giving them evidence contrary to that, the prosecutors can't just take it on face value, that they're going to have to find what people have mentioned is they're get corroboration and strong corroboration before they ever rely upon her. So that could be reasons that things are just taking a while, is to being very, very careful.
And Tim, I'm curious if you could weigh in on this question as well, and then Mentor too. So I think this is a very important aspect of what we're discussing today.
Yeah, I had this happen in a famous case, the Winchester case, the murder trial. Client did a proffer. They were like, couldn't believe what they were hearing. They wanted to go check things out, how he described what had happened. Then they found the body. They wanted to confirm with the body if everything he said is consistent with what they found in the autopsy was. They're checking out what she's saying, and or they're trying to find evidence or something to document what she's telling them before they make a decision. So that's why the proffer can go more than one time.
Mentor, anything you want to add on to that?
Well, first of all, I want to say that I do have all of the proffers of Brian Winchester on my channel. So they're there. But yes, absolutely. That's what they're doing. Obviously, she would be asked questions. The investigators are there with the prosecutors, listening in, taking notes, recording it. They will have follow-up questions and corroboration that they're going to be looking after, whether other witnesses can corroborate what she says. It could be that she mentioned other people that knew, they had information that the state didn't know about. So now they can do follow-up interviews and then later come back and have new questions for Katie based on all the information she gave initially and whatever they found out in their investigation afterwards from that information.
And Maui Swift, a loyal viewer. We thank Maui. A question that goes along with what we were just talking about. Why is she still, Katie Magbanua, in the Leon County Jail? I mean, Dr. Hamilton, is this a telltale sign that the proffer is still ongoing? If not, they would have shipped her back to, DOC.
Yes, most likely, because now we're, particularly Florida, not in pandemic standards anymore. There's not that barrier about transporting her back. And Leon County Jail wouldn't themselves have any incentive to keep, an additional prisoner there. The other thing I thought of in terms of the timing is potentially some of this evidence we've been speculating about. It could be, keeping copies of text messages or recordings of telephone conversations. Is maybe those are in the hands of a third party, and so it could be maybe they need to get search warrants to search the property of other people to obtain the evidence. Just another theory.
Sarah Drummond says, Katie Magbanua is in it for Katie Magbanua. She wants a good deal. It's slimy. But Tim, anytime a criminal defendant comes forward with a proffer, is it generally slimy or not?
Everybody wants a deal. Everybody wants the deal. And what they define a good deal depends on how much information you can get. People think the deal that I got for Brian Winchester was inappropriate, but the state needed him. He gave him information that led to the person that caused the killing, and they acquiesced to it. So, of course, she wants a deal. I'd be reluctant as a prosecutor to give her a deal. I wouldn't want to use her. I wouldn't want to risk my case with the defense lawyer up there saying she's lying, she's doing this to get out of a life sentence. I don't want that jury focused on Katie. I want the trial focused on all the other evidence, the girlfriend that said he stapled the money, the conversations he's having. I want that to be the focus.
And Mentor, what about Georgia Kappelman's role in all this? She's a cool operator, right? She's not in a rush, I don't think. Is she being calculated right now and getting what she would want to get for the state?
We are 8 years removed from this murder. They were overly patient. I think that they had enough information to go after Charlie long ago, and they waited until they got this enhanced recording that added a little bit of information, but much of what was there was already, if you listen to it carefully many times, you could get most of it. So they are being patient, of course. The case was a little bit harmed. I think Tim discussed this at his prior interview about some of the actions by the former state attorney here. But in general, I think that, yeah, she's calm, collected, she's calculating, and she's waiting for stronger pieces of evidence to come in. And I think that when it comes to Catherine Magbanua, her value will certainly exist if she can point to the other people that haven't been charged yet. So a lot of people believe that it wasn't just Charles, that it was Donna maybe involved as well, maybe Wendy, maybe Harvey, maybe all three of them, maybe two of them in addition to Charlie. So if she has information that can help lead to the arrest of new people, and we're now 8 years removed from the murder, so then that adds a lot of value to her. Not so much value when it comes to Charlie, because they felt they had enough to go against Charlie. But since they haven't charged the other ones, if she can bring them over the mountain, if they have already a huge amount of evidence against Donna, but they needed something else, and she gives that something else, and that leads to an indictment, and now she's arrested, then she has more value, of course.
And Dr. Hamilton, I mean, how long can this proffer wait go on for? I mean, the trial starts eventually, so how long can we sit here for?
Indefinitely. So there's no time limit as long as the judge is willing to grant that she stays there. It could well be, if the prosecution is getting good evidence, they could always ask for a postponement. There's another hearing before, I think it was scheduled in February, for both sides to, again, update the judge to make sure that everybody thinks they're on board for the April date. So the April date is not set in stone. It could be moved out either to accommodate some particular need of either the defense or the prosecution.
Paul Dalnaki, I didn't put this up on the screen. Comments, you guys are all nuts. I can speak for myself that I am. I don't know about everybody else. But on to the comment on the screen from Barbara Florence. And she writes, Sigfredo is needed. Tim, true statement, false statement?
I think it would be great to have him. Sigfredo, he did not testify at his trial. So he's not a committed perjurer. He just went to trial and lost. And he had the most relationship with Catherine. So maybe they're using Catherine and Sigfredo to help buttress Magbanua's testimony, to maybe make her look better, seeing that he hasn't committed perjury. And I think he was the one she was having the most conversation. And I believe he called her right after the killing on the way I-10, saying the job was done. So he could be a very important, he might be more important than Magbanua.
Interesting. Sophia Lavish, another one who follows us closely, and we appreciate that. Charlie likes to talk. He might talk about his case with other inmates, or is Charlie biting his tongue these days? That's an interesting observation. Mentor, you think he's gossiping in the Leon County Jail, or is he keeping his mouth shut? Also, I think he was in protective custody, so it might be tough, right?
Right. He's in protective custody, and I'm sure that he gets to talk to his lawyer, I think, pretty much every day. So he's getting all his conversations with his lawyer. I'm sure that he's not going to talk to anybody else, of course.
Tim, your thoughts on that?
Yeah, if he's in protective custody, he'll be in a wing where when he comes to the attorney booth, all the other inmates are locked in their rooms, so they can't. He really doesn't have much interaction. They may actually bring his food to him in his room. I know they were complaining about him not getting outside. So when they're in protective custody, he's in protective custody, and they keep him locally to give the state attorney the ability to go over there and the investigators talk to him at all times. Same thing they kind of did with the Winchester case. They moved him from prison to a local facility so we could have access to him.
This comment from LJ, I think there's a chance there could be a global plea agreement if the case gets strong. Dr. Hamilton.
I don't know what that means, a global plea agreement, so I'll defer to the practitioners.
Does anyone know what that means?
Sure. It means that they're suggesting that there will be a deal where everybody, Donna, let's say that it is revealed that it's not just Charlie, but other Adelson family members were involved, and that the state attorney will then make a deal with everybody, where they get less than life in prison, for example, or maybe one of them gets life and the rest get less time, something like that.
I don't see that happening.
Right.
Yeah.
This is a funny comment from Sonny Tanner. So I'm booking a hotel for May 1st in Tallahassee for Charlie's trial. Any suggestions, Tim? Should I rent an RV? I'm from South Florida, so I won't commute. What's a good spot in Tallahassee?
There's a couple hotels. The AC Hotel's a good one. He can walk to the courthouse from there. That's a nice one.
Next comment from Sarah Drummond. We'll do this for a few more minutes and then we'll wrap it up. But Sarah Drummond says, Charlie Adelson thinks he can beat the system. Typical narcissistic personality disorder. He's used to throwing money at things to change the outcome. Dr. Hamilton, throwing that money now is probably going to come to a screeching halt, which is why I would squeal if I was Charlie. What say you?
Well, he didn't look too narcissistic in the courtroom today, or at least, his big ego has, come down a bit. Couple things is, I would have to give kudos to the Leon County Jail if its protective custody is as my colleagues here have indicated, which is protective custody is you're really insulated from others. My experience as a corrections officer in Pinellas County, Florida, albeit many years ago, was that even those in protective custody still had a lot of access to other inmates. And inmates are clever in terms of getting info, passing info around. But I do wonder, so he has incentive to keep his mouth shut, but he also has some incentives to make him look bigger and stronger than he is. So I wouldn't put down the possibility that he's bragging to others that he's a multi-murderer, just so that he might be, trying to protect himself or make himself appear stronger and have more capabilities in terms of thinking about he may be in prison forever. And so it could be a good strategy now to kind of get that image that might help him in the future.
I was in touch with the Markell family in just the last couple of days. They are like us, just waiting. This comment from Go Georgia. Poor Ruth Markell having to wait, April 23rd. Tim, to you, I mean, you deal with criminal defendants, but how tough is it on the families of victims that you see in court?
It's really tough. And some of the crimes you'll see, it's really difficult. It can be difficult for defense lawyers. Some of these crimes are horrendous. But it's especially tough in this case. Apparently, they lost their grandchildren. They lost their son. It's horrible. It's horrible. The whole facts of this case is horrible. A divorce would have been a much easier way to resolve this thing. You just don't understand what if Charlie is convicted. Clearly, he's got some mental health issues.
This next comment from John Causey and Gloria. Charlie's attorney said something to the effect that we're going to have a problem with the jury pool with 2 trials going on and the media attention that the case has gotten. This was at the sidebar, first ML, and then we'll go to the other two. What do you make of that?
Well, first of all, let me just backtrack for a second. I wanted to say that Dr. Adam Frash was convicted of the murder of Samra Frash. And in that case, even though he's a doctor and even though he had lawyers, he talked, and there was a jail informant who actually testified at the trial. So obviously anything is possible. And it is true that Charles Adelson likes to talk. So who knows? He might be talking. That's always a possibility. But I do know that his attorney is always in contact with him. So I'm sure that he's reminding him every day to stay quiet and to just spill the beans to him only. That's it. So the question is, okay, Charlie's attorney said something to the fact that we're going to have a problem with the jury pool, with 2 trials, going media attention. I think the general impression I got of what was going on at the sidebar, because I was present, I could hear a few words, is just that the defense attorney was talking about trying to seal the proffer of Katie Magbanua so as to not infect the jury pool. But in comparison to some other trials that we have had recently, with a humongous amount of national media attention, whatever attention this case gets here locally is nothing. So I don't see that as a huge concern, and I don't think that it will be sealed.
Tim, you want to follow up on any of this?
Well, in Florida, in order to change venue, you have to at least try to sit a jury. You can't file a motion change of venue because of adverse publicity and all that. You have to try to sit a jury. So he may have been thinking that they're going to have a hard time getting a jury because so much publicity, so many trials. He may not find anybody that doesn't know anything about the case. And it's not whether you know anything or heard anything. It's whether you formed an opinion. That's all the judge has to determine. There's probably not going to be anybody that hasn't heard something about this case.
Fancy is correcting me, rightly so. She says I need to say that ML is a superstar too, and his channels are the place to go for all raw materials on the Markel case. So I stand corrected. Next comment, once again from LJ. Katie's lawyer knows full well to not allow Katie to play any games. This is not Katie playing games. The FBI are corroborating Katie. Dr. Hamilton, would it be the FBI doing this or a private investigator? We had someone that Tim works with named Monica Jordan, a private investigator. And is this even going on at all?
Who knows? But it all depends on what type of evidence she's giving as to what type of investigation, whether private or public, and whether it's state or FBI. It all depends on what information they have and who is best to most efficiently be able to corroborate it.
Here's another comment from New York Patriot Lady. She says this obviously with some sarcasm. IRS, Internal Revenue Service, needs to look at that Adelson mental institution. But on a serious note, Tim, are they obviously vetting all the accounting there right now, looking at all that with a fine-tooth comb?
That's the federal authorities. I don't think IRS. I mean, you got the FBI as the lead agency on this case with the TPD. The TPD agent, he retired. Agent Sanford's still on the job. I imagine Agent Sanford and the state attorney's investigators are the one who are doing the proffer with Georgia. I believe probably Jack Campbell is sitting in on the proffers also, because it's going to be him up for re-election if he cuts a deal for this lady who got a life sentence after going to trial 2 times.
Paper thin, and a couple more and we'll call it a day because my head is spinning. I feel like Katie's proffer is just a distraction or delay to charge Charlie, Donna, and Wendy. What can Katie say after 8 years? So Dr. Hamilton, is this possibly some sort of strategy?
Not on the part of the prosecution, I don't think. Yeah, that would, if the judge found out about that, that would not look good for the prosecution. I don't think, I don't see Georgia playing those kind of games. But I do think it's good for the prosecution that continuing to have Katie there does put pressure on Charlie. I mean, that's, yeah, I agree with that part.
Yeah.
The gardener, salient question. How did Katie know Dan was dead before the killers called her? Was someone hanging around listening for shots? Mentor, you want to address this?
Well, that's one of the questions that they should be asking Katie during the proffer for sure. And, maybe she has some interesting information that can help her credibility on that issue. I also wanted to say about the Fancy Fictions comment. Thank you about the reference to all the raw material on my channel, but I've been doing commentary on the case for more than 2 years. So there's not just raw material.
This comment is a little funny from Pancakes, not to be confused with pancakes. Hey, late to the party, but Charlie without access to lobsters for the rest of his life makes me happy. But I mean, on a serious note, once again, Tim, it must start to wear on you as a defendant as you're sitting in jail, and you've got to start to second guess things, correct?
It's very difficult, I can tell you, as a defense lawyer, to have your client in jail. It's horrible. I've got a first-degree murder case now, and he's in jail, and it's difficult, especially someone who's never been in jail, eating bologna sandwiches, getting chips out of the vending machine. He's gaining weight. He's eating bad food. He's not getting any exercise. It is going to wear on him mentally and physically. And I can guarantee you that there are inmates in there with serious charges hoping to bump into Charlie so they can get a confession, so they can be called as a witness, and the state will call
them. Just a quick promo for Ruth Markel. Her book, The Unveiling, is out. If you guys haven't purchased it on Amazon, you should go ahead and do that. And I am looking for a final comment, but I think that we have gone through all of them. So at this point, let's if we could wrap it up, let's start with the great Dr. Hamilton. Where are we now? Where do we go from here? What is your prediction for the future?
In trials, I'm not going to make a prediction because that's really the province of the jury. But I think that the case is moving forward. We have a trial date set. Unless something big happens, we will have some closure in the relatively near future, at least with respect to Charlie. And then we'll see what happens if there's any additional indictments.
Mentor lawyer, where do we go from here? What are you seeing in your crystal ball?
I'm looking forward to listening to that proffer. That's all. So I'm not going to guess anything, but I'm looking forward to seeing the proffer, or proffers plural. So I'm keeping my eye on that. Hopefully it will come out soon.
Tim, you get the last word.
I thought it was interesting that Charlie's lawyer is somewhat friendly, gentlemanly towards the prosecution, because that was not the relationship that Magbanua's lawyers had with Georgia and Sarah. It was not a friendly relationship. It was very tense. I know they didn't trust them. So it's interesting to see he's taking a different approach. And he better, he should, coming up to North Florida, you have a no-nonsense judge.
LJ says she loves me. And you know what, LJ? I love you right back. And Dawn Dequisto, and I'm sure I'm butchering your last name, says, take care, everyone. Have a fab weekend. Bring on the proffer. We'll end with that comment. Thank you all. Dr. Melissa Hamilton, who's got so many letters after her name, J.D., Ph.D., Tim Jansen, the famed Tallahassee criminal defense attorney, and of course, the YouTube superstar, true deep dive, true crime, mentor lawyer. I'm losing my mind on a Friday afternoon. We'll be back with another episode of Surviving the Survivor soon enough. Love you all. Love you, America. Thank you, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.